Today I'm sitting down with Adam Koffler. According to Twitter, he works for a few places and has been to Australia, unlike all of my guests so far. So let's go, balls deep.
I could bet all of the riches that I ever had.
Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Balls Deep Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brought to you, of course, by Fantasy Basketball International. FBIbasketball.com is the website. At Adam King 91 on Twitter is where you can find me. All of our content is on the website, as I said, and rolling out another episode of the interview series, I guess we could call it today, with Adam Koffler. Adam, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for jumping on early in the morning. I know it's early there in Australia, so appreciate that.
It is early, yeah, and our daylight savings actually ends in a week. So next weekend, so it's pretty dark actually because our clocks will be going back in an hour. Your clocks just went forward, I think.
Just went forward, so it's been tough getting the 4-year-old out of bed in the mornings. Nothing getting to school, but we're working through it.
Yeah, we're going to have the opposite actually. My son's always up pretty early. I said before, he just stumbled out of his bedroom, but he's probably been up for a while. So when our clocks go back, he'll be up at 5:30.
Right.
But luckily, he's old enough to just get up and look after himself. So
there you go.
We have to get up. Cool. So look, we've done a few of these. It's really just an opportunity. The fantasy playoffs will be done by the time this is released. So just an opportunity for those diehards who are still looking for content to get to know a few of us analysts and what our lives are like and what goes on behind the scenes. So as I said, it looks like most of the people that I get on here, I mean, I know what they do and who they work for. It looks like, and I know you're Rotoballer, but it looks like you work for, or you write for a few other places, a few other sites. So for you is fantasy, well, and it actually looks like you also do fantasy football. You tweet about basically anything just to do with sport. So for you, is this a full-time job?
Fantastic question. No, it's not a full-time job. It's not even close. I work for a defense contractor in the U.S. called Lockheed Martin. I'm a program manager there. I've been at the company 12 years since I graduated university. And actually, most recently for Lockheed, I worked on a project with Australians, and I got the opportunity to travel over there about a year ago now. It took me to South Australia in Adelaide. So I got to stay there for a week. Obviously flew in and out of Sydney, so I got to see a little bit of Sydney. Stayed right there on the harbor at the Marriott, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my day to day. I try to keep tweets to a minimum during the day. Sometimes it's difficult, depending on the news that comes out. But yeah, like you said, do some fantasy football and basketball. Started doing this fantasy content creation really around the start of the pandemic. Actually, interestingly enough, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know a guy named Dan Titus, works for Yahoo Fantasy Basketball. And him and I went to the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Conference in Las Vegas in January of 2020. So about 2 months before COVID kind of hit. And we were just kind of wandering around, shooting the breeze with people, just meeting people. We didn't pay for the conference. We just were kind of there in the hotel or whatever. And, made some connections, and we both ended up applying for the voluntary Fantasy Pros breaking news desk. So we both started, doing breaking news for Fantasy Pros, football, basketball, some game analysis, instant reactions type stuff.
Yep.
And that just kind of snowballed into, more stuff. It, eventually paid a little bit. got an opportunity to write for Rotoballer. Been with them for a couple of years now. Then sort of got into working with Action Network a little bit. Did a basketball podcast with them. Writing for a company called Mojo. They're a new sports stock market, which is really interesting. Go check them out. They're only legal in the state of New Jersey right now, but more states coming soon. So I just kind of dabble, in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so yeah, I've actually had Dan on already,
Yeah.
so sort of had a chat with him, and yeah, no, look, it's always interesting to hear how people get into this, and so I guess growing up for you, were you a player of sport? So were you sort of actively engaged in playing sports, or did you just watch?
Yeah. So definitely a basketball player growing up. I'm about 6'1", 230, so I've got some size to me. I was probably 200 a few years ago, but 6'1", 230 ish. Like to get to the paint, go to the free throw line. That was kind of my thing. Um, was a good football player, but never played sort of organized football. More of like a flag football, intramural football kind of guy in college and stuff. Um, Played some baseball, played some tennis, but basketball is my number one for me personally. And then obviously just watching, I followed all the sports really, football, baseball, basketball, and played fantasy in each one of those sports starting in 2001. So I actually started
Okay.
on Yahoo when I was 12 years old. So I've been doing it for a long time.
Wow, 12. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's even before I started.
yeah, we were like
So
obsessed in middle school.
yeah, yeah. Oh, look, I would have been if it was an option here.
Right.
But when I was 12, it was 1991. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, and I've said this to Dan and a few of them that Australia's exposure to NBA was pretty limited back in the 90s. So we basically, it was dictated by what was broadcast, and usually that was one game a week. Um, and so it was a lot of sitting up and watching NBA action. They had the replay of that at midnight. Um, I was lucky enough that growing up, I did a lot of sport as well. And so when I was about probably 15, I think 15, 16, I was playing a lot of basketball, but I got picked up by the Australian Institute of Sport for their rowing program. It was just I'd never rowed in my life, but they sent sort of coaches around to schools where we live, and did like a talent identification program kind of thing where they took measurements and did athletic like tests and things like that. And I got picked up for the rowing, um, which was fine. And I did it for about 12 months. But for me, the biggest benefit was that being at the Australian Institute of Sport, they had a massive satellite dish which picked up like NBA, and picked up American
Oh yeah, that's
TV,
cool.
TV channels. And so in their library, they had VHS recordings of every NBA game that was played. So I would go and do my training for the rowing, and then I'd just sit for sort of 12 hours and just
Yeah,
watch as much NBA as I could.
that's
Uh,
cool.
so that was good. I was lucky to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I guess fantasy was around then, but
Right.
it wasn't something that we could really do here.
We
So
take we take for granted here in the US how inaccessible basketball
yeah,
was over there or anywhere else really in the world probably.
yeah. Look, probably a league pass has really opened up the door to all of this, and getting obviously ESPN and that sort of thing as well. So yeah, I've been playing for 10 years, I think, something like that.
Ever since you had access to all those games.
Pretty much. And I think just when because I followed the NBA very closely when I was young and collected basketball cards and had favorite players and that sort of thing. And then I would say I sort of went away from basketball probably when Dennis Rodman retired, because he was my favorite player. That's why I have the 91 in my Twitter handle.
Okay.
Um, so once he was sort of done in sort of late 90s, I was 21, so I had a lot of other things going on in my life. So I sort of didn't watch a lot of NBA for probably 6 to 8 years. I knew what was happening, but but didn't follow it that closely until probably 2010 when I got back into it. So, so I sent through some questions for you. And as I said, you have been to Australia. What were your thoughts on Australia? I mean, you only saw, as you said, Sydney and Adelaide, so 2 cities. But initial thoughts?
Fantastic country. I would move there in a second if my wife let me. I just
Yeah,
thought it's a clean country, it's a safe country. People are nice, it's diverse. Like there's lots of different food and culture. Like I liked everything about it, to be honest with you. Even small things like safety and security. Here in the U.S., there's different places that you just wouldn't walk at night, right?
yeah,
And we're at dinner in downtown Adelaide, and I get to I go. I'm going to go back to the hotel by myself. We're in a big group of people, and I'm like, is it? It's my first night there. I'm like, is it okay for me to It's like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. Is
yeah,
it okay for me to walk home back to the hotel by myself? Like, that's totally safe? And they're like, yeah. What are you talking about? Why wouldn't it be?
yeah, yeah,
And like that just doesn't happen like in downtown areas by yourself if you're there for the first time as a tourist. Just
yeah.
not the case. So it's just I was a big fan of Australia.
Yeah, no, it is very different in that respect. Like I was in Vegas a few years ago, and sort of first thing I was told was don't venture off the strip, don't venture
Mm-hmm.
too far, sort of by
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And then planning a trip to Boston, Memphis, New Orleans, LA in October this year, and again, talking to people, talking to analysts and people that I know who live in various parts of the States, they also sort of say, where are you staying? What area is it in? We need to make sure that it's the right area, it's a
Mm-hmm.
safe area, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I mean, we get I guess a feeling that it is a bit like that just from watching the news and watching movies, and which obviously isn't perhaps like a 100% accurate reflection of what it's like over there, but it does give the feeling that there are a lot of areas that I should avoid when I'm over there. But here, I mean, the city I live in is pretty small compared to those. So I live in Queanbeyan, that's the city that I live in, but it's basically part of Canberra, or the ACT, which is the capital of Australia.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, God, like there's nowhere you couldn't walk here.
Right.
If you're out at night, like it's safe everywhere, pretty safe anyway. Um, and so, are you planning on coming back? Like, is work going to bring you back here at any point?
I sure hope that work brings me back there.
Yeah,
Even if for some reason work didn't bring me back, I could foresee me and my family doing like a summer and sort of going to multiple countries over there, Australia, Asia, places like Japan,
yep,
South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore. Like I could totally see doing a trip like that. My wife is half Filipino, so
okay,
uh, doing an Asian trip and then tagging Australia and maybe New Zealand on would be fantastic. And I want my son to have those
yeah.
sort of cultural experiences as well.
Yeah, I think it's good to expose them when they're young as well. Yeah, New Zealand's great. We've been there a couple of times. It's amazing over there. Uh, and so you'd obviously look at heading back to the Philippines. Has your wife been there for, like, is it somewhere she visits regularly or hasn't been there
No,
for quite a while?
it's actually not, and believe it or not, she hasn't been there.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
yeah,
So,
so she's
yep,
she's born here.
yep,
Her
okay,
mom's Filipino.
okay,
Um, and actually, I've been to the Philippines. So
right, okay,
yeah, so a buddy of mine from college and I took a trip to. He was Filipino as well, so we took a trip to the Philippines and we added Japan onto that trip. So we did Tokyo and Kyoto, and that was an amazing trip as well. Um, like
yep.
I would say that the three coolest places I traveled to are Japan, Australia, and Iceland.
Oh, Iceland, nice. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
totally different, obviously, but
yeah.
just these places are just so unique, so different from the U.S. Totally different cultural experiences.
Yep.
But again, it all comes back to like safety and security. I swear to God, like I have no idea why that's so important to me, but like just being able to walk around wherever, feel safe. It's also interesting. Maybe this is weird, but when you travel, you get done traveling, 50 hours, by car, by plane, by sitting in the airport, everything else, get to Australia, and then you're all the way across the world, and everybody speaks English. It's like the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure like maybe I'm alone in that, but it's really weird to travel that far and then to have everybody understand what you're talking about.
Oh no, it is. I could understand that. We've been to Europe. We went there for our honeymoon, and that's a long trip for us as well. That's sort of a 24-hour flight,
Right.
and I mean, there are quite a few people there that speak English, and not necessarily really well. But I mean, we landed in London, so that was fine. But then when you go to Germany and Spain and those sorts of things, it's that I would imagine like coming here and having everyone speak English and just know exactly what you're saying. It would just make things so much more easier.
Right.
And yeah, look, and if you head back to the Philippines, I've got a ton of Filipino mates that I play basketball with. So
yeah,
and they travel there regularly, like once a year.
So that's not too far of a trip, right?
I don't think so. No, I've never been, but they seem to go all the time. So,
right.
I mean, they all have family there, so I guess they're not paying for accommodation or anything like that. So it's just the flights. But I don't think it's that far. I think it's only a few hours from Australia.
There are so many basketball courts in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So many basketball courts, so many basketball jerseys, and we found a court, and me and my friend's cousin started playing, and there were just a group of people like on the stands watching us.
Yeah.
Just totally mesmerized.
Yeah.
It was also because I'm pretty big, compared to a lot of the people over there. So
yeah.
they were totally mesmerized. It was a really fun experience though. Like that's a place I'd go back to as well.
Yeah, I know basketball's a big part of their
for sure
lifestyle and culture. It's massive. Like we have leagues just here in where I live in the city that are just Filipino leagues, and anyone can go and play, but they're organised by the Filipino community and
right
majority. And I've played in that league a couple of times, and it's so I'm 6'6", so I'm like. They want guys like me playing just because
you're kind of giving me Andre Kirilenko vibes with the Utah Jazz shirt.
No, look, I just Jazz aren't a team I particularly like, but I just like NBA, so I just buy NBA clothes.
Right.
I don't care what team it is. So yeah, I think we've sort of been. I mean, we've covered the travel bit, that was something we were going to get to later, but we got onto it before. But sort of outside of fantasy and work, what is it like? You've got a young family, obviously, and so what is it? What do you like to do? So weekends, holidays, those sorts of things.
Wait, there's life outside of fantasy and work?
There is sometimes.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a 4-year-old son. He'll be 5 in July. Honestly, in our free time, it's a lot of family stuff. We live about 25 minutes away from Disney World in outside of Orlando, Florida.
All right.
So we've got annual passes, the three of us. So we go there a lot. We do the different parks. We go to some of the different resorts. Sometimes we'll get dinner reservations and do stuff like that. There's lots of playgrounds around. My son loves to go to the playgrounds. Each neighborhood here is like its own unique playground, so we'll do that a lot. He likes to be outside. It gets really hot sometimes here in the summer, but no, it's a good time. We love living here. And it's nice also to be, as a basketball fan, I'm a 76ers fan, born and raised in Philadelphia, so just naturally a big Sixers fan, but I've become a fan of the Magic since living here as well. And I'm only about 20 minutes down the street from the Amway Center, which is super nice. And I had a really cool opportunity come up, about 2-3 weeks ago now. I was a credentialed member of the media for the Magic Jazz game, actually.
Yeah.
So got like, floor access and sat in the media area. Um, got a chance to ask Paolo Banchero a question post game that he answered, what it was like going up against, the trio of towers there in Utah with Walker Kessler, Lauren Markkinen, and Kelly Olynyk.
Yep.
And so that was a really cool opportunity, like getting asked the Rookie of the Year, most likely a question, and
Yeah.
having him answer and sort of, agree with you that was a tough situation for him.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
super cool experience. Then I'm also they've asked me to come back, so I'm actually going back for the Magic Nets game coming up on Sunday night US, early in the morning Monday in Australia, and then also the Cavs Magic game in early April.
Yeah, wow. That's cool. Like that's
awesome.
That's
dude,
sort of
awesome experience.
Yeah, that's just sort of something that I would dream about. Like being able to go. I mean, I've never even been to an NBA game.
It was surreal. It was surreal. And then I can't imagine now going and spending $100 on a ticket, sitting in the nosebleeds, not getting food served to you, not getting courtside access.
yeah, it's ruined you for life now. You're
totally,
not going to be able to,
yeah. But just such a blessing, like to think that I'd get the opportunity to do something like that when I started, writing fantasy basketball content. I didn't think that'd ever be the case, especially being part time. Like this is not a full time gig, so getting that opportunity is amazing.
Yeah, wow. And I would assume, like, I know when I was in Vegas, we were there for summer league, and so we met some rookies and it sort of bumped. We went and did Top Golf and stuff, so bumped into a couple of players, saw a couple of players, and obviously you watch them on TV, but just seeing them in real life, they're just so big. Like,
I was standing 10 feet from Walker Kessler.
Yeah,
the guy is a giant.
Yeah,
I'm 6'1", he's like 7'1", but he looks like he's like 8'1".
Yeah, because they're just so thick. Like I remember when we went there and we saw Karl-Anthony Towns, and like height, yes. Like he's obviously what's Cat?
I think he's like 6'11",
6'11", maybe close to 7 foot. So he's not actually that much taller than me. He's only 5-6 inches, whatever. But just the presence and the space they take up, like they're thick, big humans. Like it's so yeah, no, I can imagine that just seeing a crowd of them, all of them, would just be you'd be looking up. It'd just be constantly looking up.
So. And then I'm standing there in the the media area where they serve the food and stuff, and then Jason Terry walks in, just like standing there in line right behind me, about to get his chicken and pasta.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he works for the Jazz in some capacity, so that's why he was there. At that game.
Okay, yeah. And so were you able to talk to him, or you just sort of stood there and kept?
No, just sort of stood there and was like, "Oh my God, it's Jason Terry!" Like, So it was my first experience doing that. I didn't want to rock any boats. I wasn't going to even ask any questions, to be honest with you. But I'm sitting there in the interview rooms with pregame with Jamal Mosley, head coach for the Magic, and it's it would have been awkward if I didn't ask a question. Like there weren't that many people there. It's the Magic Jazz, both teams sort of out of it. Jazz are sort of in it, but it's not a ton of media attention there. So there's probably 10 people in the room, and I'm like, this is like, I don't get this opportunity very often. Like I might as well like take advantage of it. So I stumbled on my first question asking about Wendell Carter Jr.'s injury status. Coach was kind of like, "What are you talking about? This is a weird question." But I think I made up for it when I asked Paolo about what it was like going up against those big guys.
Well, look, I mean, you've been invited back to do it again, so couldn't have been that bad.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're sort of talking about favorite things now, and you've already said you're a Sixers fan and sort of a bit of a converted Magic fan as well. But outside of basketball and outside of fantasy, what are your movies, TV shows, music, anything else that sort of stands out as if someone was to meet you, what would what would they go, oh, he likes the same things that I do?
Yeah, I have an interesting sense of humor, I think. Some of my favorite movies, so I've got a gamut of sort of favorite movies, but the Rush Hour series, like Rush Hour 2.
Oh, yeah.
With Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan. I just think that movie is absolutely hilarious. Like I could just ramble off all sorts of lines from that
Yeah.
movie. Just a classic. I just watched over and over again as a kid. Um, favorite TV shows. I was pretty obsessed with Entourage,
Oh,
as
yeah.
well as Breaking Bad. Like Breaking Bad was a show that I could sit down and watch 20 episodes in a row.
Mm.
Just every episode ended in a cliffhanger. So for me, that was just like totally addicting. Storyline just developed so well. Um, and then these days, it's honestly like these days it's a lot of basketball. Like I'll stop working and we'll eat dinner, put the kid to bed, and I'll watch basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might watch a 90 Day Fiance or something with my wife for a little bit, or House Hunters or something. But
Yeah.
it's a lot of basketball these days, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and that's, I mean, we talked about this a bit before we got on air, that living here in Australia, I mean, there's positives and negatives for our time difference and that sort of thing. And one, well, it can be both really, is that games for us tip off early in the morning, so 9, 10 in the morning, and run through to about 4 in the afternoon. If you're not working, that's great, because so you, like yesterday, I was off with a headache and a bit sick, so I got to watch a couple of games today.
Headache
I'm
and a bit sick.
headache and a bit sick, which I was like, and it's, yeah, part of it is a sleep thing as well, but like now it's the weekend, so we can sort of watch games. But then if I'm working, I miss everything. If I'm running a workshop or a seminar or something, I miss all the games, and so nighttime is when I have to watch it, because once, and I mean, again, for me, it's like my kids, after about 7 o'clock, they just take care of themselves. They get themselves off to bed whenever they're ready, that sort of thing. So it is a lot of watching basketball late at night for me. So I really like the off season, because I can watch the TV shows that I haven't been able to watch,
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
and the movies, and I go to the movies a lot, probably once or twice a week. With I've got a couple of mates that come with me, so we go and try and catch most things at the movies. Breaking Bad was arguably my favorite show of all time, I think, as well. So
All right.
I understand. I get that
Yeah.
one. I think I've probably watched it 5 times,
Yep.
the whole series. So,
Yep. You're
uh,
getting me juiced up to watch it. Want to watch it again? I don't have
yeah,
the time. I don't have the time right now, but I'm gonna try to make the time. Once the basketball season ends, I'll be able to make some time.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, once basketball's done, it's good. There is some time. So, and you're obviously right for football, that sort of thing. So you've got favorite teams in those sports. Is it the Eagles? Like,
It
is it?
is.
It's where you grew up. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I know a little bit about football, not much,
Right.
enough to have a bit of a conversation. I think I know even less about baseball. So if you like a baseball team, I probably couldn't pick
Yeah.
which team
So
it is.
I grew up playing baseball. I rooted for the Phillies. Baseball's sort of taken a back seat as I've gotten more involved with like the fantasy football and the fantasy basketball content creation.
Yeah,
So like before I was creating content, all those sports were sort of on equal footing. As I've gotten more engaged with football and basketball, baseball's had to take a backseat. Like I don't have enough brain capacity to try to, weave in 3 sports. So the people that do 3 sports for fantasy, like super impressive.
yeah,
Even two sports is impressive, but 3 sports, I can't even imagine doing that.
yeah. Look, I do. I mean, I do basketball, obviously, and then I play fantasy football here. So it's the football that we play, not the NFL. Um, and even just setting my lineup, I forget to do that sometimes, because I'm so focused on fantasy basketball.
Well, isn't that the 1 o'clock Eastern games start at what 2-3 a.m. in Australia? I mean
Yes.
that's tough, especially with the injuries that come out, the inactives that come out an hour and a half before that.
Yeah.
Like that's tough.
Yeah.
If you're asleep, you set your lineup, and somebody is not playing that week. All of a sudden,
Yeah, if we're
it'd be
most of our
difficult.
leagues, so leagues that I'm commissioner in, we actually have to set our lineups, or pickups, to be sort of 7 a.m. your time,
Okay.
which is 10 or 11 p.m. here,
Yeah.
because if we set it for like closer to what tip off might be. It's 3 a.m. and we're all asleep.
Right.
So if I'm in a league that I've joined with Americans and the lock is later, then there's a lot of nights where I'll set my alarm for 2 a.m. to get up and check injuries, and
Yeah, definitely.
especially this time of year. And that's why, I mean, like a lot of fantasy analysts now, I really preach ending your season now-ish. Sort of like most of my leagues have wrapped up or are wrapping up this week, because like I get up in the morning and look at the injury report, and as we've seen with the Blazers, they're just slowly phasing their guys out.
Listen,
Until,
I got totally screwed by the injuries and the people resting in fantasy basketball this season. Like, it's my main league's championship this week. I did not make the championship despite having the first overall seed with a first round bye, and I got bit by the Anthony Edwards bug.
Yep.
I got bit by the DeAndre Ayton bug. I should have been more prepared for the Celtics and them resting, Malcolm Brogdon and Al Horford. Obviously, Horford's been resting all season, but Brogdon didn't play after being listed as probable. We've seen that from the Celtics multiple times this season. Like, both those guys are probably droppable, honestly, in that situation where you have to get a win. But then I had issues in the beginning of the week with guys like Jeremy Grant.
Yep.
I can't remember who else, but it was a disaster. Like, I was supposed to have 59 games played. I ended up having 49 games played with all my 5 ads for that week. So it was just disastrous.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. The Hornets are terrible.
That's a whole nother situation to discuss.
Yeah.
I think there's some shady business going on with the Hornets.
I don't know Mark Williams is now
he's
going
probable
to play today, like out
he's
of
probable.
nowhere.
Dennis Smith Jr. after having to leave the game last night, he's probable. Obviously they have to list Kelly Oubre and Terry Rozier as questionable because they pulled them early, so they have to act like they're injured. It's a disaster. You can't trust teams that are not fighting for legitimate playoff spots down the stretch.
No, and it's interesting. I mean, this isn't meant to be about fantasy basketball, but with the teams like the Pistons and the Spurs, like the Spurs are they're just alternating. They're resting a guy, then they're playing him, and they're making up an injury. But I don't get why they're doing it, because it's not like they're going to win. Like they're bottom 3, that they're locked in as a bottom 3 seed. So what good is resting these young players? Just play them. It doesn't matter.
I think it's just to limit like their exposure to injury, probably. But to not act like you're shutting a guy down. So it's their way of limiting the risk there while they're not going anywhere this season. Probably. But then what about the Thunder? Like, the Thunder do this weird thing where a couple weeks ago, the coach was like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not going to play back-to-backs. He might be limited in minutes. And then the first game after that, right, he goes out and plays like 38 minutes. And then like the next week he plays a back-to-back. Like, it's like these, like, they're lying straight to our faces. And there's not just fantasy basketball, but like the sports betting in the US now, like it's exploded. So these things are like super important, and we're getting lied to by these head coaches.
Oh, I'm glad. Like, I know a lot of you guys that do fantasy over there, you have a sort of a toe in the water of betting and gambling and that sort of thing, and it's huge. And it's something that I'm not sort of across. I'm not part of it, but I can imagine, and talking to everyone, it must just be so frustrating that teams, as you said, they blatantly lie about injuries and what to expect. And even from their starting lineups, they change close to tip off.
If you're going to be in the betting space, you have to have your ear and eyes to the injury report, and you have to understand the trends and the coaches, certain coaches say the same things. Certain teams list their players the same way, depending on when the game is, if it's a back-to-back. Like, for example, like I was talking about the Celtics, like they list Malcolm Brogdon as probable. They pretty much do that every game on the front end of the back-to-back, and every time he sits. And same thing with Horford. Like, he's questionable, but like every back-to-back, second night of a back-to-back, he sits. And then the Bucks do the same thing. They'll list Drew Holiday and Giannis and all these guys as probable, and then they'll sit. And we've in the past, like the probable tag has been 99% you're playing, like 99.99% you're playing.
Yeah.
But and questionable is 50-50, truly 50-50. It's definitely not that way anymore.
No.
And it's gone completely the other way as sports betting has like really ramped up. So it's been tough for a lot of people. But in general, I always tell people that's why the unders on all these player props are going to be more profitable in the long term, because you're going to have
Yeah.
issues like this, especially down the stretch in the NBA where, like we said, these teams that aren't playing for anything, like they have no incentive to keep Terry Rozier on the floor.
No.
Right? I mean,
no.
So.
I think it's at the point now where if common sense was prevailing and was ruling here, a player who isn't on the injury report and then they pop up on the injury report as probable, you would go, okay, there's a niggle there, but he's probably going to play. It's
That's
generally
not
now,
the case.
if they pop up on the injury report as probable, you might as well rule them out.
And illness is the new rest. I tweeted this a few days ago. Anytime you see illness, it's Lauri Markkanen pops up on the injury report with an illness, he's resting that night.
Yeah.
Like unless it's a playoff team and a guy like truly has an illness that is like being reported about by that team's beat writers.
Yeah.
If no beat writer for that team knows that this guy had an illness and wasn't at shoot around, then I don't buy it.
No. Well, I think because DeJounte Murray has been out with an illness, I would think possibly he does actually have an illness, because the Hawks,
in that case, yes,
they want to win.
Right.
So yeah, that's been really bad for me for fantasy this week.
I bet. Yeah, he's a guy that you don't want to miss out on.
No, it's a points league too, and it's a points league that I set up with a different format. So steals are worth like 14 points.
Oh wow.
So he's a top 5 player in that league, and I haven't had him in the final this week, which has been fun.
That's tough. Yeah, that's tough.
So final question, which I've asked everyone: if we were drafting, I don't know, next week, for example, two parts to this question. Where would you be comfortable drafting Victor Wembanyama? And where do you think he will go in drafts next year?
So I think that he's going to be. I tried to sort of compare him to a couple different players and how they did their rookie seasons. He's probably some kind of mixture between like Anthony Davis and Kristaps Porzingis potentially. Like guy that's going to score, he's going to get rebounds, he's going to hit a couple threes, he's going to get lots of blocks. Percentages are going to be pretty good. He shoots pretty high percentage from the charity stripe. Field goal percentage I think is like somewhere between 45 and 48%. But I don't think he's going to play like these heavy minutes. Like he's not playing a ton of games, right? So going through an entire NBA season, I don't see him playing like 30 plus minutes a game, like right off the bat. And so it could take a couple years for him to like really ramp up. And I mean, once he ramps up and stuff, like he'll be a top 10 fantasy basketball asset. But for his rookie season, I see him, averaging somewhere between 12 and 15 points, 8 to 10 rebounds, a block or two, a 3-pointer or two. It's probably good enough for top 40-ish. So I'd say I'd be comfortable with him in the 3rd, 4th round, maybe.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think I'm probably a little bit high, but not much. Like
Okay.
I'd probably go back end of the 2nd round.
Okay.
Only because I could probably then pair him with someone at the start of the 3rd round. But in saying that, yeah, look, I think probably 3rd round is about right. In terms of where I think, and you're pretty much the same as all the other analysts I've spoken to, is we see him as that 3rd round sort of pick 30, pick 35, something like that, which probably means that we're not going to have him
Probably not,
because I think with the hype, but like assuming he doesn't get injured and we follow sort of the path that we've been following the last 6 months, I reckon he'll go 1st round in some leagues. I think people picking at that back end of that 1st round will take a chance.
So the problem is he's going to a bad team, right? Most likely he's going to a Detroit, San Antonio, Houston. I mean, these teams, look what they're doing down the stretch with these players. Yeah. Like so you're going to get to the fantasy basketball playoffs and you're going to be screwed.
Pretty much.
Especially like after he's played 60, 70 games, and now you expect him to like carry a team to the championship. Like I don't think that's going to be the case.
No,
So
no, no, no. I know. Look, I agree completely.
I'd be comfortable in the third round. I would want two players that I'm well established guys that I know are gonna, and
Yeah,
then third round I'm okay taking that gamble. But second round, like early second, mid second, I can't see that for me.
yeah. No, look, I won't. But I just have a feeling that there'll be in a lot of leagues there'll be that one guy that'll go, yeah. I just really want him on my team, and they'll take him. So I think his ADP might be sort of, I don't know, inside the top 20.
That's
But we'll
crazy.
see. We'll see. I think, who did I talk with last? Was it Dan or I can't remember who it was, but we were talking about, again, who do we compare him to? So who can we look at and sort of go, oh, yeah, look, he's similar. And for me and for someone that I spoke to, my mind went to Karl-Anthony Towns in his rookie season. And I've looked up his numbers a few times. I think he was around 18 points, 10 rebounds, 1.8 blocks, which is like a career high in his rookie season. Pretty good percentages, couple of assists. Didn't hit a lot of threes in his rookie season. He was only 0.7 or something. And I think he was like a top 20 player in his rookie year. So I guess there's a world where per game he could be that. But as you've said, whoever he plays for, they're not going to play him 70 games, 75 games.
No way. And it depends on the coach, right? Like we've seen Popovich go really slow with some of these rookies, like Vassell, Keldon Johnson. They were kind of nothings their rookie season. Like we saw flashes, and obviously, Wembanyama, number 1 overall pick, is a little bit different, right? But
Yeah.
I just don't see a world where like this guy plays 30 plus minutes a game for an entire season. So there's a lot of risk there. Especially his body type too. Like there's risk in just taking the hits and stuff, and getting bodied in the NBA. Like I don't know how he withstands that. He's played like 20 games this season or something, right? It's little. It's like less than even college basketball.
Yeah, it's going to be physically. It's going to be a huge test for his body. So we'll see. Anyway, I just thought it's an interesting topic, and yeah, people are already starting to talk about it. So
listen, I brought up Kristaps Porzingis. He's like always the secret weapon for me in fantasy leagues. Like nobody likes to draft him, but he's always like top 20 when he's healthy, and he's been relatively healthy this season.
Yeah, I think this is probably. I mean, I don't have him on any teams, but I would figure this has been his best season in a long time, if not ever.
Yeah, he seems healthy. The Wizards are hanging tough in the Eastern Conference, because you can be like not that good in the Eastern Conference and be a playoff team.
Yeah,
and Kyle Kuzma and Bradley Beal sit like every other game, and Porzingis has been the constant for them. Like he's my secret weapon for the last 3 years. And this year he's put it all together and stayed healthy.
He has. It's good. It's good to see those players, like similar to what Embiid was like the first sort of 4 or 5 years of his career, when he was so good per game but just couldn't stay healthy. And this year and last year he's been relatively healthy.
And this year I expected, I'm a Sixers fan, and I'm sitting here expecting him to sit back-to-backs when they play Charlotte and Indiana. And he plays both of them and crushes in both of them, and doesn't even play the fourth quarter in both those games, but puts up like 40 and 18 with ridiculous percentages. Like that is a fantasy basketball MVP and a regular season MVP.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't someone I've asked, but will he get MVP, do you think, this year?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think he's the odds-on favorite as of today.
Okay. He might be. I don't follow the betting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I believe he is. I mean, look, I think the Nuggets are the better all-around basketball team than the Sixers. The Sixers are probably not even they're probably a play-in team, maybe, without Joel Embiid. Yeah. Even with James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, I don't know that they're going anywhere without Joel Embiid. I think the Nuggets have a fighting chance with the healthy Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. to be a solid 4 or 5 seed.
Yeah. So, no, I agree. I think probably a month ago I would have said it's Embiid. It'd be Jokic, sorry. But I think the last month Embiid's just been dominant.
He's turned it on. Like you could tell he's going for it. Like he's playing in all the back-to-backs. Like that doesn't happen. Like he's going for the MVP, and he's he's just showing that he's that much different. He's that special.
Yeah. No, it's been pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
So look, thanks for coming on. That'll do for today's show. Went a bit longer, but that's fine. There's always plenty to talk about, and your wife kindly vacated the house for you, so we'll let her come home. So before I let you go, I mean, have you got? I know it's sort of it's the end of the season where there's not much coming up, but in the off season, leading into next year, what have you got sort of on the cards for what you'll be doing?
Yeah, honestly, not a ton. Taking some downtime in the summer in the US here is nice. Before football and basketball, we've actually had an interesting couple years here with COVID because the basketball season didn't start until Christmas 2 years ago, and so there wasn't like the same kind of overlap between preseason football and basketball content. Now there is, so it gets pretty aggressive in August, September timeframe for both sports, putting out content. So it's nice to take a break here in the summer. Yeah. But I'll be continuing on with Rotoballer and also with Mojo, providing some content there on a pretty consistent basis. Probably not as much over the summer, but and as always, like you said in the beginning, like you can find me on Twitter at Adam Koffler. I tweet my thoughts a lot. Been putting out player props on a pretty regular basis. Have hit it a pretty good clip there. So feel free to follow me along. I'm not asking for any money for any picks or anything like that. They're not behind a paywall. So if you want to tail them, feel free, go right ahead.
Cool. Yeah. Look. Yeah. I think we have to stay a bit active anyway in the off season, but it is a good time to, as said and you said, it's a good time to catch up on TV shows and do some things that we don't get to do during the regular season. So, so that will do it for the show. Remember to check out all of our content at fbibasketball.com. Discord server is ramping up. We've got a lot of Dynasty stuff coming out with Matt Lawson. We'll be launching a new Dynasty podcast as well. Because I'm just stupid, I've already got my player ranks for next season almost done. So they will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. They're obviously going to change a lot, but we will have content coming out. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. And if you can give us a thumbs up, that would be really appreciated. Until next time, catch you later.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.